If you want students to work in communicative events, you need to put them in communicative events since the beginning. That's it. They don't need blocks. They don't need anything before. You are going to be amazed because you are not teaching rocks or tables, right? It's human beings, as BBP says many times. We are wired. We already are designed for this, right? Mm-hmm. Can you imagine if I'm giving this podcast to you in my second language? Imagine if we're making mistakes would be you make errors. Yeah. There's no podcast. That's ridiculous. In real life, that doesn't work. So why are we doing this for our students, right? Yeah. I want to do it task-based. Very difficult to convince my colleagues into changing. It was a grammar curriculum what we had. So they didn't want to do it. So let me do it this way myself for 1 year. So we started with very basic Spanish. They didn't know anything much. And at the end of, by May, right, they were able to understand very well and say things that for me were mind-blowing. What happens is that it's not that you are completely blind to task-based language teaching and you think that it is a panacea. And it's just that it aligns very well with what we know about language acquisition.
This is the Teacher Talking Time podcast.
Is it possible to build a truly task-based curriculum? That's the question our guest today, Claudia Fernandez, will help us to answer and unpack. A lot of language programs say they're communicative, and few truly are, which is what makes Claudia's work so compelling as she aims to enact this. Claudia is clinical associate professor at the University of Illinois, Chicago, where she directs the Spanish language program under a task-based methodology. It's one of the rare programs in North America that are truly from the ground up task-based. She takes us behind the scenes of what it takes to enact a task-based curriculum, the materials, the mindset, the buy-in, and as you'll learn, a kind of a Herculean effort to get the administration and the university on board at all. Claudia's research interests focus, of course, on task-based learning, but also on how languages are learned. And in her case, in the Spanish context, she's been widely published as a very respected professional in this field, and we're very lucky to have talked with her on the show. Just before we dive in, if you don't subscribe to the show, just click that button below. It really helps us out to be able to bring you more episodes like this to our channel. Now, let's dive into the episode and our conversation with Claudia all about TBLT.
I was hoping that we could start from the beginning, and been following your work for a little bit of time now. We've interacted a couple of times on LinkedIn, which seems to be the new platform now for language educators. But I think perhaps the best way for us to start this conversation, Claudia, is by asking you, who is Claudia Fernandez and why does your work matter?
Okay, I guess that we have different, I can tell you maybe my academic professional me, right? Maybe is the most interesting for people. So I am a language teacher. I have taught Spanish for a long time. And I began in Mexico. I am from Mexico, originally in Mexico City. And I began my career as a teacher of English, as many people like to teach additional languages outside of the English-speaking countries. Usually English is very demanding. So I started my career like that, doing that a long time ago, maybe, 30 years ago, maybe. I know that I look young, but it's 30 years, more or less, by the time that I think about that. So what happens is that I was interested in science when I was in high school, because usually you want to follow the steps of your favorite teachers. And I had a very good teacher in high school, a biology teacher, and I like the scientific part of that, of doing experiments and things like that. So I decided to study biology in Mexico City. When I graduated, I spent actually a gap year in Minnesota when I finished my high school. The high school in Mexico, I spent 1 year in Minnesota learning English. And I guess this, now that I think about it, being as an adult, I was 18, learning an English, in an additional language like English, immersed, because I was living with a family and I was going to school, and I spent 9 months doing that. I think now that was part of what influenced me to become a language teacher. But I didn't know that at the beginning, of course. My family thought that it was important for me to learn English, so they sent me in 1988 to Minnesota to the house of someone that had 2 kids, and I was taking care of the kids, and it was a life-changing experience, when you study abroad young. But I went back and I studied biology as I wanted, right? And I finished. But the thing is that at the end of my year, the last year of my major, I was very alone in the lab. I was doing things in the lab, and I thought that it was a lonely thing. I was spending 8 hours every day in a lab with rats. Now that I think about it, this sounds awful, but anyway, so I finished, but in my mind, I said, if I want to study biology, I really want to teach biology, because I think that since I knew I wanted to become interested in education, not be part of education. I didn't know exactly what it was, if it was like a teacher in school or if in a higher education, but I wanted to be involved with education. Education was something that and I thought that it was something that it was easy for me to explain things or to be, learning. It was fascinating. Anyway, so I studied biology. I finished in spite of being only. And then I had an aunt who was an English teacher. She passed away 2 years ago, unfortunately. But she said, you guys, she told me and her daughter that we are the same age. You guys are doing nothing in the summer. And I have this opportunity with the British Council, which is going to give us 1 month of language training for you to at least learn something about how to teach English. Is going to be good for you, etc. It was free for her, and so she put us there, right? My cousin, and I absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved it was a month intensive language. I don't know exactly what type of training it was, but it was from the British Council. I remember that was a long time ago. I loved it. I love everything that I learned about how people learn languages, about all the different approaches. That was maybe the mid-90s, and I was maybe. So I say, you know what? I don't know if I want to be. That coincided with me feeling alone in the lab, right? So I said, maybe while I was 25 or 24, so maybe while I find my path, I'm going to start teaching English, which was in high demand. I knew already English because I had spent about a year in Minnesota. So the minute that I started doing that was it. I said, this is what I want to do. This is exactly what I wanted to do. And then say, I'm going to continue. I would like to learn more. One month of training is not going to be enough. I had the experience, but I knew that I was lacking, that I needed to learn more about it. So I took a 1-year course at the National University in Mexico to teach English and then to teach Spanish. So I was having these certificates here and there until I decided that I wanted to go abroad and study a master's degree in language. And then I learned Spanish is something that you can teach because in the US there is a high demand, etc. So I said, I want to study in the master's degree in, I think it was language and literature at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. And I went there because there was a guy that I liked. And so it was a double interest there. But then when I was doing my master's, which I loved, I was already older, like 28 or something. So I really felt that I was learning a lot about Spanish languages. But and Fred Ekman, who I don't know if he's alive or not, but he was a fantastic person, a fantastic professor in second language acquisition. He taught me a lot of things. And one of the things that we used was Bill Van Patten's book in Making Communicative Language Teaching Happen. And when I finished that book, I said, this is my goal. So I want to study with him. I want to study with Bill, and I really want him to be my mentor in my PhD. So I was very lucky that the following, after I finished my master, he accepted me as one of his students. And I went to UIC exactly when I went to UIC because he was in UIC, because he had just moved from here. I don't know if you remember of him. He had told you that he was, for a long time, for many years, he was a professor in Urbana-Champaign, in the University of Chicago in Urbana-Champaign, which is the same system as UIC, but in Urbana. We are one of the sisters. And then I applied to study in Urbana-Champaign to work with him after he had accepted me. I was very lucky to do that, and I was very excited about it. And then he told me, I'm moving to Chicago, so you have to, if you want to work with me, you have to register, you have to do it. I said, yeah, that was, you told me, so it was a little bit stressful. But anyway, so I worked with him in Chicago, and he was my mentor, you remember, the
guide, coach.
And maybe that's, if you didn't know, maybe that's why the things that I'm going to tell you today, I think we have had this situation
Sounds
before.
Familiar. Okay.
So anyway, so so I did my PhD at UIC. I told him, I was very clear. I said, you know what, Bill, I really want to study my PhD, and I wanted to be with you because I want to be a language teacher. I want to know everything about language acquisition that I can learn, so it informs my practice, right? I had that clear since I was maybe 18 or something. And he said, fantastic. That's because he loves teaching too, right? So I said, so that was my main goal. And then I was very lucky that I finished my PhD. I got a job at DePaul University here in Chicago. And DePaul University, of course, it is a middle-sized university. And my first job was mostly in teaching language, Spanish teaching language, as a national language. And then after 7 years there, I moved to a liberal arts college in Galesburg, Illinois, Knox College, because my husband finished his PhD too. So we found jobs nearby in that area. So we moved there, and it was also my job was like a language teacher. So in all these, so I have been accumulating a lot of experience teaching Spanish. And I was learning. It's amazing that you can do a PhD in second language acquisition or anything, and you learning doesn't stop there. There are so many things that you need to learn along the way, and it has happened to me. And then the destiny is that I was doing okay in Knox College, teaching Spanish. It was a nice life there in a small town with my husband. And then the position at UIC opened, directing the Spanish language program. The same position that Bill Van Patten had when he was supervising me. It's amazing. It's just how destiny happens, right?
Following the footsteps.
Yes. I was not planning. I had tenured already. I was a tenured professor at Knox College. It was not in my plans to come back to Chicago or to UIC at all, right? But the position opened, and the description of that position had my name. I said, this is exactly what I wanted to do. And I can do that I knew that I can do that very well, and I knew how to do it, what to do to learn so I can do it better. And so I applied, and they offered the position. So we moved back to Chicago, say 8 years ago or something. It was funny because I had not set foot at UIC after I graduated, and going back 15 years later or something that is more or less what has shaped me, and I am an educator, a language teacher. I think it's the best thing that I know what to do, right? The things that I enjoy the most.
Yeah.
I am fascinated about how people learn and how people learn languages, and as you guys are, I'm sure. So that is a very nice way of putting your knowledge together. And the classroom, you observe, you learn, it's, as I said, I keep learning. And in this newish job that I have directing the program, it's amazing because I have TAs, right? Language, like graduate TAs, like teacher assistants, who are doing the master's or the PhD, as I used to be.
Right.
And you can see yourself in them, how you started, the things that you believe, and how things have changed. I feel so privileged and so lucky to do what you love.
It's funny you said that you read that book, Making Language Communicative Again, which I think it's a classic book. I think it's out of print. I think a lot of BVP books, there's one from Input to Output as well. I think it's also a classic. But I wanted to ask you a question about that. What was it like to have Bill Van Patten as your supervisor, as your coach, as your mentor? And perhaps it's the one lesson, or perhaps the most valuable thing you took from that period of time.
Oh wow! I guess that he has had so many students. I guess each student has something different. He is a person that has had most influence in my career. Usually your advisor is, but mostly someone like BBP that is so knowledgeable and that has this talent of explaining difficult things in very comprehensible ways. It is amazing, that talent that he has. He's a great writer. So that was before that. When I was with him, that was in the 2000s. It was, I guess, before much of social media and things, before the age of anxiety or things like that. But so what happens is that, I really appreciated, he was a person that is with me that let me be very independent. He was not holding by my hand. He bought me all the equipment for my dissertation, and he didn't know much about this equipment. It was a newish thing that people do, a machine that's to measure trials to criterion. And I remember very well that the manual to use this machine, computer machine, had three big books, right? So he got the machine, he got the manual. He told me, these are the manuals. Read them and find out how this works, right? So he never sat with me, helping me what to make this work. It took me all my spring break, 10 days, I remember. I didn't want to be alone in the lab. I was alone in the lab,
Rats.
with at least they were, but at least not with me, but not, I didn't, he really take very good care of me, but he expected me to work by myself. And if I need help, I had the confidence of asking him. But I am telling you one thing, that I don't think there is a day in my life that when I work, I do not think about the many things that I learned from him, that I apply them. I don't think there is. I don't think everything that I do see what is the influence and the stretch that he has had with me. Yes, I understand. I don't think he's my idol, and I don't, and I am not blind. Of course, he's a human being and everything. But it is, his influence has been huge. On me and many other.
Influence, Leo, I think you agree, right? Like we've interviewed many people on this show, but when we interviewed him and it came out, I think, I haven't checked the stats, but like by far the comments we got, it's just his sphere of influence and how many people admire him is vast. People saying, this is great, oh my gosh, and then telling stories about meeting him at a conference or interacting with him, and the amount of stories we've heard from people after that episode was released. If Bill is listening, which I'm sure he's not, but if he is, like, his influence, is incredible in our field. Yeah,
it's amazing. Yes, totally.
And since we're talking about BVP and we're talking about the influence that he had on you, I think we should start by talking about communication or the communicative approach, because we know that many programs out there, many language programs, claim to be communicative, but very few actually deliver a truly communicative program. And at the University of Illinois, Chicago, you direct a language program that is 100% task-based. And we are in a profession that is most of the time, if not always, limited by driven syllabi, exam preparation. And this is actually no small feat, Claudia. What were the core principles or the decisions that helped you and your team fully align the curriculum with a TBLT framework? In other words, what made this possible? What was the motivation to actually do this?
When I was in Knox College, I was starting more interested, because of course the concept of tasks I learned it from BVP. Of course, I knew he was the first person that that told me about tasks. But I was doing other things, like things for my research, my dissertation. So as you go along in your career, of course, you have different interests. So I was finishing with the interest that promoted my dissertation, which was input processing. And I was doing how people notice things in the grammar and things like that. So I was trying to understand that better, was still interested. But then when I was in Knox College, I had to become better at facilitating language learning, Spanish learning. I started to become more interested in tasks, right? And then read Mike Long's book of second language acquisition and task-based language teaching, which is absolutely wonderful, right? And I was, this is what makes sense. And I don't know, maybe I had something that I cannot teach otherwise. I cannot, now that I know this, right? And I fully understand it, there's no way for me to do other things that if I want to have a communicative class, it's gotta be task-based. There's no other way. I cannot do it otherwise. So I started with a class in Knox College, piloting how can I do tasks in my class, and I thought that it was very successful. It was amazing with the other context from UIC. So I already knew that when I come to UIC, right, I'm gonna do a task-based curriculum. There's no other way. And I don't know.
What were some of the key points there in the pilot that made you believe that it was actually successful? The educators there?
Yes. So what happened was that at Knox we had 2 tracks for students or for learners to achieve the language requirement, which was 1 year, right? It was an intensive 2-semester or 2 terms, I think, sequence, right? And one that it was less intensive was 3 terms in the year, right? At the end of the 3rd term, you finish with your language requirement. So I said, I want to take these 3 terms of language learning, right? And I want to do it task-based because it was very difficult to convince as usually happens, my colleagues into changing the ways they were changing. It was a grammar curriculum what we had. So they didn't want to do it. So let me do it this way myself for 1 year, 1 school year, and let me see how it goes. And when I was in Knox College, one of the things that I had to do was to direct language program in Barcelona, Spain, for a year. And in that year, I discovered a textbook. That caught my attention because at the beginning of each chapter, the textbook would say, in this unit, we are going to write a recipe. Or in this unit, we are going to, I don't know, give a presentation about the future of the world. I don't know, something like, so this looks like tasks, right? So I said, I think this textbook could facilitate the creating a curriculum 1 year based on tasks. So I use this textbook as a tool to facilitate my vision of what I wanted, right? I didn't know much about needs analysis or things that you are supposed to be doing when you create a curriculum or a course based on tasks. But I knew that the tasks were more or less interesting for my students. So I did that, was very rigorous. Of the task of the textbook is going to guide everything, right? So I have 6 tasks or 5 tasks or whatever. I have identified them very well. And I told my students what was the plan. And it was, of course, these students were quite different from my students here at UIC. These students were living in the campus and they were very much into studying and not have very complex lives like the ones that my students here at Chicago have, because they are just, or it's a European university and they are not that the other students, they have complex lives, but you know what I mean? It was more into this smallish campus, and they were and one thing to say, they had much more time and to be engaged with the class. And what happened is that at the end of these, so we started with very basic Spanish. They didn't know anything much. And at the end by May, right, they were able to understand very well and say things that for me were like mind-blowing. Two students really were, I think, at the intermediate mid-level. They were speaking it at the level of this course. It's advanced, but you know what I'm like starting to do. So I said, wow, this is pretty amazing. Of course, I'm saying that I knew very well how to do it. I had all the experience already accumulated to do a good job. And the students were good students to do that. So, of course, everything was into place for it to work, right? So it's not that. So that was for me, this is what I want to do, right? This is really helping students to advance in their proficiency and to do things. It was very satisfying for them to say, I can do this, right? I actually can do this, right?
From, you said beginner, let's say in September, to
May.
Benchmark it May, intermediate level.
I would say 2 of them were absolutely, those 2 students I had like maybe 15. All of them were very good. I'm telling you, it was not that. But I was amazed that 2 of them that didn't know anything. Then suddenly with the same, it was
because flashy signs in our industry, right? Learn Spanish, learn English in time frame, which, you know, what does learn mean? What does quantify? But in this case, it sounds like beginner to intermediate in 8 months, right?
In 9 months. But of course, this is that nobody wanted very much. Not that nobody wanted, but it was a very heavy course to give because you teach every day hour, and university professors are not very used to teach every day, to tell you the truth. So it was an intensive thing, I have to say.
Did they have outside of the course? Because living in Illinois, Spanish is somewhat common in the U.S., of course, but
not in Knox College necessarily. Okay. Students were living in the dorms, so it was more like a bubble, right?
It's even more impressive, actually. Then.
Yeah. So it was. I was impressed too. It was quite. So I said I knew that what happens is that it's not that you are completely blind to task-based language teaching and you think that it is a panacea, and it's just that it aligns very well with what we know about language acquisition. I'm maybe not perfectly. I mean, I don't know. There are so many things that we need to learn about TBLT still that we have not resolved.
Yeah.
But at least it doesn't go up. It doesn't work against it.
Yeah.
It works it's aligned, and that's what is.
Yeah.
It has more potential to work.
That's exactly what
than
I was going to
other.
say. It seems, Claudia, like even for me, like I'm currently teaching at a college where the curriculum is driven by grammar points. And very much like what you said, I refuse to go back to teaching the way I used to teach. And I'm just looking at the grammar points and I'm like, let me see if I can think of tasks that would naturally allow the emergence of these grammar points during the task. Which, again, as you said, what makes task-based language teaching perhaps, I wouldn't say the approach to language education, but it makes it the more learner-friendly approach based on what we know about how people learn languages.
I'm here with John from My Speaking Score. And John, I think we agree that as entrepreneurs, one of the toughest things for us is to describe and articulate our business, what we do, why we do it, why we love it, who it helps, what problem it solves, in a super short, crystal clear way that's clear to the audience. So why don't you give us your 20-second pitch of who you help at My Speaking Score?
It's a great question. My Speaking Score is an AI-powered platform that predicts TOEFL speaking scores and gives our users feedback on how specifically to improve their TOEFL speaking performance so they can get a high score on test day.
Incredible. So if you're listening to this, you're a teacher, you help students with TOEFL, help them get their speaking score on TOEFL. Check out myspeakingscore.com. John would love to chat with you about how you can work together to help your students pass their speaking score on the TOEFL test. John, thank you for this.
Thanks, Andrew.
And you've said that it is possible to create a program that is 100% communicative and 100% task-based. So I think my question to you, and I think a lot of people who are considering approaching curriculum design, course design, or even institutions, what are some of the key decisions or some of the key decisions that you've had to make in order to make sure that the curriculum stayed truly communicative and task-based? What kinds of things did you have to let go of to make that happen?
When I started with UIC, when I started, it's just for your audience to know, to understand the context. When I started at UIC, the position was not the director of the program. They were looking for a director of the program. And the position was not given to someone internal, someone external. So the program, as it is now, as it was before, was comprised of 1,000 students as per semester. So it's a pretty big program. And the requirement is 4 semesters of or the equivalent. You don't have to study 4 semesters. Students take the placement test, and whatever is the placement, they can take 3 semesters, 2 semesters of only 1 semester, depending on the placement. It has to be the equivalent of 4 semesters. So that is the program. And since Spanish is very popular in the US, well, many people study Spanish, and that's why the program is so big. And it needs a director that makes the curriculum possible and the language requirement possible for students to fulfill. So there was someone, my very dear colleague, Liz Aguilar, who was like the interim director while this position was filled. Okay, so when I arrived, so that is one of the factors that contributed for me to change the program so drastically. The program had a very grammar-based curriculum with typical like composiciones or compositions and things like that, oral exams at the end. So there it was very typical, right? And I say, I'm not going to do that. But I didn't want, I knew, there is a book that Gillian Lord wrote about directing language programs I absorbed that book. I read it from the beginning to the end. That gives you tips how to direct a language program. And one of the things where we need to create a mission of the program, right? And you need to make the program, one of the things that for the program to work is that you cannot just go and impose things. I think leadership 101, that is the thing. So what happens is that I knew that it had TAs, maybe 15, 20 TAs, and I don't know, another 10 lecturers, which were professors, instructors that were having a lot of experience teaching. And so I took advantage of the fact that I was new and that people want for me to like them, right? So they expected the new person to come and make changes, right? So, but I knew that I had a window of opportunity there. After 1 year, I knew that any change might be a little bit more difficult. It has to be now. So I was over the summer when I got the position, I was thinking, how can I change the things into task-based? So what I did was that I learned about the program the first semester. and you're to get to know everyone, and everything, ask a lot of questions to Liz and everything. And then the second semester of the year, of that first year of that I had, I created 5 workshops of 2 hours each for everyone, for all the teachers and the instructors in the program. And the purpose of these workshops were to identify the mission, the new mission of the program, or a mission, an ideal thing that every one of us wanted for the program to be, right? Because a mission is usually an ideal thing that we all want to achieve or to look up to, right? And that was the task. The task was at the end of this, that was the mission. But these workshops served for me to start talking about task-based language teaching, and to the extent in which this framework of this approach would be beneficial to our students based on the knowledge that you guys know more about the students than myself, right? I was a student at UIC, but it's not the same. It was 20 years ago. So based on the profile of the students that we know, and because everyone has the same goal, we want students, of course, to become proficient. That is the main goal. So based on the common goal, so I started trying to sell the idea of task-based, and I think I gave the idea that I know what I was talking about, right? So they say, after 10 years of being with this same textbook and grammar, maybe this is like a refresh. So they were tired too, the lecturers, right? They were tired. I was new. I was injecting some energy. They were taking into consideration their opinions. We were going something interesting, a mission. So everything like was into place for me I have a plan in my head, of course, right? But I wanted to feel that it was everyone's work, idea, and of course their input was helpful for me too. So that was one of the things people usually ask me the same thing. How people agreed to your plan? So that was these factors that not everyone is in the position to have, but that I have to say that contributed to my idea. So by the end of that year, we already know that it was going to be a change in task-based was to be the framework. They knew more or less how to go about it. And then I looked for the materials. The textbook that I found in Barcelona was something that would facilitate the things. And then a lot of work from my part on identifying the tasks that we wanted to do. And then because I didn't want for them to be difficult to implement, right? I want them to say, this is the task. This is how you're going to implement the task. This is the nature of the task. This is the rubric. This is the evaluation criteria that you're going to use to evaluate the task. And you have 5 days to prepare the students for this final task. And this textbook has some pedagogic tasks that you might want to identify and are going to help you for the students to accomplish the task in 5 days or on 2 weeks. So I didn't want them to feel like, oh, now I what I'm going to do, I don't know how to go about it. This is just a mess. I'm going to say that there was not messy moments in the transition. Of course, not everything was perfect. I had to do things for that. I thought that if we had, for example, exams, like proficiency exams, along with the task, but it was going to be a good idea, and it was not a good idea. So I removed the proficiency exams, and I just left the tasks to be the assessments.
I've learned my lesson the hard way with that too.
Right. Yes, exactly. I'm not saying that it was a smooth transition,
right?
But I have to say that if you have a clear vision of what you want and several factors get into place for it to be put into implementation, then that was my situation.
I feel like, Claudia, most people we have on here, like yourself, who describe these really successful initiatives of disrupting a curriculum and a program with the task-based, why does it still why can't we have people come on and say, this is the norm now, and the way that we currently do it is the opposite? Why does it have to be such a Herculean? What you're describing sounds amazing, but it sounds like you're upheaving everything and implementing. And you keep saying for 20 years, why 2025 is it still such a Herculean effort to get? Why does it take someone amazing like you to do all the work and just give it to people? Why can't what you've described be the standard?
easier. Exactly. I found the only one book, a textbook, and I could have done my own activities. I was going to do that. I was, you know what, if I have to create my own tasks, my own materials and everything, I will do it. But I found this only book, only textbook that is not ideal. It doesn't even call it a task-based. It was just the way the textbook was that facilitated. Well, only one. There's only among the dozens of books that they are. So I guess many people have answered the same way as I'm going to answer that now. It has been difficult and is becoming difficult, and maybe it will be difficult until one day I hope it is not anymore. For many, it is, for some reason, there's something about tasks that it is not very well understood. I don't know what I say. Maybe it's unfamiliar. Maybe it is. I'm talking about the context of Spanish in the U.S., which is the one that I know, but it might be the same for English or for other languages in the world. So this is one, people do not know very well what is a task. Mm-hmm. People do not know, and if they know, they don't know how it's possible to implement it in the classroom without giving a list of vocabulary items before. I mean, I'm telling you because it's what people ask me every time that I give a presentation about tasks and tasks. Say how, so they have not tried it. You know what I mean? They have not have or maybe they don't have the opportunity to try it and to see how it goes. And then many people also are working already with syllabus or with curricula that are grammar oriented. So there is no how. One of the questions is how can I put my tasks into this curriculum that it has the future and the present tense and it is incompatible in a way because they have told me I feel guilty that I am not teaching for the future and the students are just speaking with no plan in hand, right? Plan, as I say, without learning. Well, I learned the subjunctive or I learned the future. We are just finding if we like flowers or not, something like that. So what is the task today? The task today is to find out who is the healthiest people in the class or something. That is more of communicative goal. So this is one of the things. The other thing is that the profession, and that unfortunately the profession still lacks a lot of training and understanding. Mm-hmm. And the textbooks, I have to go to textbook because people usually, me included, I use textbooks to facilitate or to make your job easier. How can I say it? I want to say it diplomatically. Textbooks offer something that the profession has accepted because they don't understand how language learning goes. Mm. So they have profited, unfortunately, and I don't want to sound blunt, but it is, I think, they have profited on our ignorance. And I heard one of your podcasts that we're talking about headway, one of the textbooks. I think we have, I think every language has its headway. So in a way, textbooks pull the profession back. But also when you tell the authors, the textbook I have, why do you? And they tell me something that is very true. The teachers want this. So it is like a vicious cycle, right? And we have not figured out how to get out of this cycle.
On that point, I'm curious about this because I think you're right. I agree with you that the teachers want this, teachers maybe feel they should teach this, future, perfect, continuous, whatever it is, right? But universities are businesses, right? Oh. Schools are businesses. Business is tough right now. And every other industry in the world, most of them, good ones, focus on serving your clients first. And students are clients. Adult students are clients. And you gave a really good example earlier of this task-based curriculum course that you implemented 9 months later. The students I'm sure, exceeded their expectations. So if there's this thing that exists that exceeds client expectations, and the business is not implementing it, what's going on?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a complex. I think that at the university level, at least, there are several factors. It's an answer that what I'm going to say is going to be incomplete and maybe wrong. But my point of view is that from someone that works in the university level is that there are several things. Yes, it's true that even public universities, they have to make profit and they live out of the tuition in many ways of the students. But the thing is that in higher education, it is the job of the professor is very well respected in the sense that nobody can tell me what I want, what I do in my class. Right? Nobody, the deans or anything. If I have my syllabus has to be respected, right? Nobody can tell me your syllabus is wrong, right? So this is something that goes against maybe faculty governance. I don't know. The professor is the master in the classroom, and I agree with this. He is the expert, right? Nobody's going to mess with my. So if the curriculum based on grammar is the curriculum that this expert feels that it is okay, it should be okay. The university cannot tell me what I should do. That is one thing. The other thing is that it is maybe the students nowadays are more aware, or maybe not. The students usually expect that in a language class, in a Spanish class, you learn grammar and you need to know what the future is. It is normal. It is what it is, right? Because my students sometimes tell me why I don't think that I have understood have learned anything. And they have, you can't really give a presentation on the best neighborhood in Chicago. Yeah, but they cannot write. They say, yeah, I can I can do it in Spanish, but I don't know the conjugations still. It is normal that for adults you want to say, what is it that I have that I know? But with language, you will never know that. You will never know what you know. That is fit for the language. But adults want to know. It is normal that I don't. So if you say we're going to learn the future and you're going to see how it works, it is very satisfying. So why and what is wrong to learn the future, how the future works in Spanish, right? There is nothing wrong about it, right? So that is another way of thinking of understanding. And it is easier for students sometimes to just fill in the blanks in the exams and have an A, right? Than to become creative and to be in front of the class speaking in Spanish who wants to do that. Many students feel uncomfortable with the situation. And then the other thing is that, to tell you the truth, I think that many universities do not care much about language learning. So whatever goes, they are not going to. It is what I see, right? It go maybe in the last century, at the beginning of the 1900s, maybe it was something big, studying German or something. But nowadays, other majors have more prevalence, and people are trying to reduce the language requirement. Universities are closing languages programs, so it is not that really people have these factors are into place that do not help the profession.
Yeah, it's definitely taking a back seat in the sense that we are downplaying the beauty, perhaps, of learning a language and learning a language like you learn within a TBLT framework, which has matured over the years, I would say. And as you've wisely pointed out, Claudia, many teachers still struggle with the fundamentals of task-based language teaching. And I kind of address a couple of points here that you brought up. I think the first one is a recurring concern that I've heard you saying, and I think we've heard this in workshops that we've done in the past. And we're doing a presentation on task-based language teaching, but with a podcasting element to it. But a lot of teachers say, oh, I know what a task is, but how do I build a lesson around it? So I think for teachers who are stuck in that mindset, in that idea, what, in your opinion, is the biggest mindset shift that they need to make when moving from being task aware to having some sort of task-driven teaching?
I think one of the mind shifts is that, students are going to be able to use whatever language that they can use, right? Whatever it is that they have. Maybe they have 3 words. Maybe they have a few sentences, depending on the level of the students. And the students when they express or when they interpret what you're saying, they are going to make mistakes. They are going to make errors. It's not going to be perfect by any stretch of the imagination. No, there is not going to be accuracy at the level that we're expecting at all, at all. So let's just come into terms with that, right? And that doesn't mean that you are not teaching well or that the students are stupid or whatever, that no, it is that it is normal. So I think many people have told you that you need to let go a little bit of the control that you have over this is the future or this is the present tense that I have. No. So let's just have a communicative goal, right, that we all want to know about, right, in the context, in the real world context of the classroom, right? And let's see, for example, one of the things that I wanted to do, or that I sometimes do, or I don't know, it's that sometimes I ask people to do and I have not found that they know how to do it. But let's see that the task is to find the telephone number of 3 people in the classroom. Sometimes you wouldn't want to share our telephone number, so then maybe it's a bad task. Let's say that is a task. And we have 45 minutes for students at the end to get the telephone numbers of 3 people. So the first, 40 minutes, so that is the communicative goal, right? To be able to ask for a telephone number and to be able to understand the telephone number of someone and to maybe be able to ask, what's your telephone number? And then So if that is the communicative goal, so what I would say is that students are going to maybe make mistakes on the numbers, right? They need to know the numbers. But maybe at the beginning, they can hear several conversations of people exchanging numbers, right? And of course, the conversation is not going to be 75 and 35. It's going to be 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 3, 10, things like that. So what I want to say is that, you can create a class based on that follows a communicative goal, right? And you leave the students by the hand, right, from input to, if the task is output, in this case is output, right, to output, and expect that the students are going to interact or to do the task in ways that are imperfect, right, and that you are there to help to give what they need in order for them to continue, right. But that is the way it goes. So the mind shift that you are asking, Leo, is let's see what happens if I do not pre-teach anything.
Yes.
And let's see what happens if I just give directions, little by very specific, and lead the students, right, and see what they do.
No.
And you are going to be amazed because you are not teaching rocks or tables, right? It's human beings, as BBP says many times. We are wired. We already are designed for this, right? So and I'm saying you because I have read the theory and I have seen with my own eyes all the time. I teach in my program. I teach Spanish 101, 102, 103. I teach basic students. It's not that I am a random person that has read. I see it, and you are going to be amazed. Students do it.
Yeah. That's
so
very
it may
true.
be the mind shift is that really they do not need to know the subjunctive first. Really, they do not need to know how the future works. I swear to you, I guarantee you.
Yeah, no, it's funny you're saying this because I'm teaching I would say what level is that, Andrew? We're in the same class. Like a pre-intermediate, like I would say
A2
A2. It's an A2
Is it
class.
English?
Yeah.
English,
yeah.
Okay.
And grammar curriculum, driven by grammatical points, the grammar McNuggets and all that. One of the things I've noticed in that program is that, everyone is teaching these grammar points, and I'm like, I'm going to just design a bunch of tasks. But last week, I had a student who asked me, oh, Leo, we're learning any grammar? I'm like, well, you just don't know you have. But I said, okay, so let's do a lesson on grammar. And I did the lesson, and halfway through the lesson, one of the students stopped me. He's like, Leo, this is really boring. Can we just go back to doing those problem-solving things that we were doing, where you give us a situation and we have to come up with a solution? I said, oh, okay, interesting. So even the learners themselves have kind of used to the idea of not having me lecture about a specific grammar point for half an hour. So I think once we introduce learners to a different way of learning a language, I think eventually they're going to start buying in. Do you find that this is the case with TBLT?
Yes, for sure. The thing that happens is that you need to be very serious for those that are hearing this. You need to be very serious on the task as an assessment because my program follows Michael Long's curriculum that you have, that the final tasks drive the curriculum and they serve as assessment. And you have pedagogic tasks that prepare students to complete the final task. So you need to make the student aware that they are going to be tested on the extent to which they can carry out this task in 2 weeks or in whatever is at the time that they have. And they need to know that before the lesson or before the unit of or the module starts, right? You are going to, this is what you have to do at the end of this module in 2 weeks. And this is the rubric that I'm going to use to evaluate your work. This has to be known beforehand, before everything starts. And then if they know that everything is well, if you're going to take, because at least my students in the US and maybe I don't know, but the students in my university, they are very much grade oriented. So if you tell them what is going to be the test and you tell them what is that they have to do, they will do it. If you want me to do this task and you're telling me that by doing this pedagogic tasks in the activities in the classroom and these things for homework, I'm going to be able to get an A in this task, I do it. You tell me what they are very much into that. So then they feel that actually it was pretty interesting that we are learning about these things as your students too, they say. And it is interesting that I was able to give a presentation about something that I created and I explained to my classroom and actually won the first play. My classmates voted for me for my thing to be the best. So what you cannot do is that you teach tasks and then you give an exam that is grammar or vice versa. So everything has to be aligned for the students to understand what is that you are doing, right? And how they are going to be evaluated and what is expected for them to do, right?
Right.
And of course, since they are tasks and you're going to be using your own linguistic resources, I hope that you can use key resources that people in general use when they do these tasks, right? But if you mess up the verb morphology, it's not going to break it or it's not going to be a deal breaker for you to get an A, right? No, can you imagine if I'm giving this podcast to you in my second language? Imagine if we're making mistakes would be you make errors. There's no podcast. That's ridiculous. In real life, that doesn't work. So why are we doing this for our students, right?
Yeah.
It's
That's
funny.
the million-dollar questions. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this to them?
Leo, you know the other program I teach in, and it's funny, Claudia, these students are very much of the grammar test. That's their norm, what they know. And one assessment we did last week was we did a seminar, which just groups of 4. And I said, you're going to come and it's going to be 15 minutes and you're just going to talk and give your opinion about the topics that we've covered in class. And they had no idea. And we scaffolded it, we practiced it during class, but they had obviously never even heard of that before. And they're like, what words do I have to use? And I said, I don't know. Whatever comes to your mind.
Whatever you can, exactly.
And
whatever it is that you have.
To your point of like grade oriented, like they all came prepared with their notes. And some of them were really nervous. Some of them performed really well. Some of them performed, I would say, not so well because it was their first time ever doing this. But they all were laughing and it was just like a conversation and about the topics. And then we had certain outcomes that we wanted to hit. I want you to incorporate at least one reference to the sources or whatever. But after it, they were all like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that was fun. Oh, I learned something from this guy or from this woman. And
Exactly.
But at first, when I first explained it to them, it's conceptual, right? Because the concept is foreign when you explain it to them. But then this is the essence of task. When they do it, then it's, now I get it.
Yeah, and for the teachers to know, the people ask me too, what is one of the things that it's like an obstacle for language, for the ability to work, to be buy-in, to be convinced for teachers, is that if we really need to understand how language acquisition happens, at least what we know for now. We don't know everything, of course, but whatever we know. And if we know how language development happens, the process, what is the theory and the research says to us, then it will make it easier for you to think, oh, task-based makes sense then. But if we do not have that knowledge, then it is difficult to understand something like task-based. That is what has been my conclusion in the last years that I have given presentations and I have hear questions from the audience. And I believe that it's not going to be easy to understand or to believe, right, or to think that, well, it has potential for language. If we don't know what the nature of language is and what happens when people acquire a language, right? What is the process of language learning?
Right.
And we need to, and I believe that we need to have more training or more opportunities for teachers to learn that, right? In that way, they are going to be there. It's going to be like it has been for me. It empowers you, right?
Yeah.
You can make much better decisions about your lesson plan, about your materials, about it is something that has to guide you. And unfortunately, not everyone knows that to the point that is going to be useful.
Yeah. You've mentioned something interesting because you were talking about the final tasks, the pedagogic tasks. So I think a lot of the listeners probably are not familiar with that concept. Perhaps you could walk us through what the final task was for a very specific level, along with the pedagogical tasks that are used to help students perform. Because, as you said, perhaps the most difficult thing for a lot of teachers, myself included, when I started switch to task-based language teaching, is I was still evaluating my students using a grammar criteria as to just performance. So what would that look like in a task-based language teaching course?
Yeah. One of the tasks that we have, I can give you one task at the fourth semester or I don't know. I'm going to use one at the fourth semester, but if you want someone at another one that it is lower, let me know. So one of the tasks that we do, that the students do at the intermediate low level, the fourth semester of the Spanish, is that they have to read the problems of three people, right? People that have functional people, right? That one person has the difficulty of waking up early because this person always arrives at work late. The other person needs to going to open a store and needs uniforms for the personnel, for their workers. And the store is like an electronics store, so they want certain types of uniforms. And the other one is someone that loses his keys all the time and needs to find a way of not losing them. So students read these problems and they say, your task is to design an object that solves one of these problems. And you are going to design it, right? It's your own design. You draw it. And you are going to present it to the class and you are going to describe this new thing, this object, right, to your classmates. And your classmates are going to decide what is the best object? What is the object that it is the most innovative? You have a criteria, the most innovative, the most useful, right? The one that is going to solve the problem the best for one of these characters. So that is a task. The task is to design an object and to present it and to describe the object.
Yeah.
It is a kind of easier task in the sense, not complex. Maybe it's difficult for students, but it's not a complex task in the sense that it is describing the here and now. Tasks that describe things that are there and then are more difficult. So I have to accept that this is a task that it should be not as difficult for intermediate mid students, right? Because it's describing something. Anyways, they need to describe it and usually when you describe something, you do it at the level of the discourse, at the paragraph level. This is the type of language that we are expecting. So imagine that you say, now this is a task for your students and you need to say, you need to find a way, you as teachers, right? Need to find a way for the students to give a presentation orally, spontaneously, with in the slide is going to be the object that they created, and they are going to describe it orally to the class. So this is the task of the students. And you have 2 weeks to do it. Like in my case is 3 and 6 classes of 50 minutes each to prepare the students to do this. And this is the criteria. The criteria is do the students finish the task to completion? Is it really what we want the students to do? I also have in the rubric, is it comprehensible? Can we comprehend what you're saying? Because it's a presentation, right? And is a presentation, how do you call that, attractive to the audience? It's a presentation. So if you read, it's going to be very boring. So nobody reads presentation. So please don't read because it's going to kill. This is not the task, etc. And if you are using, but it's optional, if you are using key linguistic resources that people say when they describe an object. And I say that because I cannot put it. It's optional if you put this or not. And I don't give a lot of weight to this. But I want to enhance this because I want to say to students, sometimes speakers use key phrases that gives away what is the purpose of what you're saying, right? So if you say, it works with, right? Or it is for, to describe an object. This is a key chunk that I suggest you to use, right, because it's going to be very helpful for you, etc. Right? So this is a task. So so for the audience, so the first step is you identify your task and you know the task, the nature of the task very well as a teacher, right? You know exactly what your students need to do. You know what you expect, and you know how you are going to evaluate them. You need to know it like the palm of your of your hand. It is something that you need to understand the task extremely well, the final task, right? And then you say, what is that I can do so students can accomplish this task successfully, right? According to this criteria, this rubric. So what I do, for example, is the first day in the module, right? I have 5 days, remember? So the first day, I say, we are going to hear lots of descriptions of interesting objects, right? And we are going to decide as a class which is the most interesting object or the most horrible object or depending on the object. But they need to hear lots of descriptions of objects, right? And you have to do something with this description. And as a class, we are going to say at the end of the class, after listening to all these descriptions of objects, we are going to find out what is the favorite object of the class. And the objects have to be interesting, right? Maybe pieces of art, maybe something that they have never seen, something like that. The students have listening, these 50 minutes of classes, we have listened to maybe 8 or 7, I don't know, descriptions of objects. And people are going to say, what does sirve para mean? Or what is plastic? Then through this task, the task is to select the best object, but the students are going to start asking questions that they don't know, right? And then as a teacher, that means this.
Because they comprehend input. That's where the comprehensible input comes in.
Exactly. Because they have a task of understanding what is the object and say what is the best object that we're going to select as a class. And then the communicative goal is we have selected this single object, right? As a class is the favorite. What does it say about us? What is about our personalities or about anything? I mean, something that is more meaningful for us, right? But the objective was to select the best object, but students already process lots of input that they are going to use, or hopefully they are going to start using, internalizing, right, for their final task. So they already know, maybe they learned, people really repeat a lot, sirve para, it works for this, right, a lot. So maybe people usually, it's something that you say is very handy when you want to describe it. And then the following day, we do something maybe something, I don't know. You have an object that I want to describe. You have the different objects. It's like an information gap task, right? And you have to hear me describing the object, and you have to identify which is the object that I am describing based on the photo that you have, right? Again, so what does it mean? What is this? I don't know. How I need to say this. How do you say silk? So again, it's another task, but with more or less the same input.
Yeah.
And so I can, little by little, we have unpacked the task a little bit, the final task a little bit, and I have created several pedagogic tasks, have their own communicative value goal, right?
I was going to say, yeah, okay, good.
Because they are tasks, right? It's not exercise, just grammar practice, right? They have a goal. The goal, one of the last ones is that I have, people love it, is you have to describe an object that an object that is very American, that only in American happens, like a baseball cap, or things and clocks, things, these are kind of shoes and you have to explain what the object is for someone that from other culture, right? So you can see, so they get the list of the items that are very American, and we talk about these American items, what makes American. But so we have the communicative goal, but as Florencia Henshaw says, always the meaning functions follows the meaning. So I want the meaning, which is what is the most exciting object, and all the structures that are going to be carrying away for us to achieve this.
Yeah.
So in that way, because students are not, as I say, they are not rocks, so they are learning that. And if they know that this is this is interesting description, and I need to describe something in 2 weeks.
Yes. So you're kind of priming them already. Okay.
Exactly.
So interesting, right? Leo, you say this a lot because a lot of teachers ask us questions about this too. And what you're describing, it's a really good example. Like input tasks are tasks too.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I think a lot of, maybe not all, but maybe when they start with a TBL approach, maybe only think about output tasks as with beginners. Oh, my beginner can't do this and can't do this, which is probably true and fair enough. But Leo says this all the time. Input tasks are tasks too. And
Of course, yes. And it is, and yeah, but the students can only say maybe yes or no, or good or bad, or I don't know, but they have already react. If they say yes, it's because maybe they understood something that you tell them. So it is, yes, so everything has to, how are they going to learn the linguistic resources that you want for the task? Through input? There's no other way around.
Yeah.
And it has to be, they need to listen to the input, interact with this input, comprehend the input, in exchange the input. So what I say to my instructors, you have to really exploit the input that the students are hearing. Repeat it, expand it, give examples. It's like oxygen, right, for the students.
And one of the ways in which we can achieve that is through recordings of, and you've mentioned this as well. I think Jane Willis talked about this as well. But using recordings of proficient learners performing the exact same task comparison. So the question then, Claudia, becomes I use it successfully with students, but I wanted to ask you this: how do you see students responding to that? Does it motivate them? Does it intimidate them? How can teachers scaffold that comparison in a more efficacious way?
There's always people, depending on the task that you have to do. And there's always humans that are nervous presenting, right? That is a human thing. That there's nothing wrong with that. There are usually people that are timid, that they don't want to really talk. We have all of that. It's just human. It's not that. But my point is that, isn't it something that I think it gives them confidence saying, first of all, if you made an error, this is the rubric. So check the linguistic resources, and it is only 25% of the grade. And it's not going to be 0 or nothing. It's going to be, the expectations are this. It's not perfect, but the most important thing is for you to really convey the idea of your object and to give enough information for your classmates to vote on the object that you want them to vote for. So that is expectation. And I'm going to help you along. You are going to be prepared. It's not for tomorrow, right? It's in 2 weeks. So I'm going to prepare you every class. You are going to be learning something that is going to be a stepping stone, or there's going to be something that is going to be helping you for you to do this successfully. And what is the criteria already? And then, of course, one of these tasks students have to be very close to the final task. The students eventually will have to be in front of the class and present something before the final task. So it's a matter of already touching the waters and make it so that is, if you are prepared, if you are being prepared, when you invited me for this podcast, you didn't ask me yesterday. You asked me, like, I don't know, a month, 2 months ago or something. You gave me the information that I need to know for it to be successful. You told me about the program. So for me to be confident doing this, right? So we do the same things for us. So it is very unlikely that a student is going to be very nervous if they already know what they are going to do, if they find relevant, everything that they are doing, they know that it is for this precise task. So in that way, you help the student in being ready for this. And so it is there's always someone that it is nervous, of course, right? But in that way, you make sure that everyone is ready to go. And they are ready to go. I haven't ever, I think, find a student out of the 1,000 students say, I don't feel ready for the final task. I don't think it happens. It will be unlikely, right?
Huh. It's funny because we were talking about, in the beginning, I wrote a note down. I wrote it down here because I wanted to come back to this, because you said something which is fundamental to those who want to adopt task-based language teaching as part of their teaching repertoire, which is understanding how language is acquired, the grammar. And I remember you saying that this is fundamental to good teaching. And I know you've done a lot of work and research on input processing, materials evaluations, and how a lot of the classroom practices that we currently adopt unintentionally work against our goal, which is to acquire a language. So you've done work on how learners acquire grammar through input processing, especially in Spanish. And I think a question that I've received from 2 people that when I announced this podcast, who said, I want to learn more about this, is what does the research, Claudia, tells us about how grammar is acquired through tasks and input-based approaches? And what are some
Some
instructional
instructional
habits that may be getting in the way? of
In the way,
acquiring?
okay.
Yeah.
There is no much. I don't want to simplify it a little bit because the process are very complex, of course. But my point is that what we know is very clear, right? And you learn grammar and and everything else, right? Pronunciation and pragmatic and everything. You learn all of these when you are exposed. I know that is repetitive. When you're exposed to input, right? And the input is comprehensible, and the input is rich, and it is compelling. Students have to pay attention to this input. So there's not much science around it. That is the thing, right? That is what you need. Students need to be exposed to this language. They need to understand this language. They need to make the connection. They need to process in the terms of they need to assign the meaning, and for the grammar to start developing in their heads, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is no way around it. That is what the evidence. The thing that happens is that are they going to be learned the grammatical point that I want them to learn? That is a that is a coin in the air.
Yeah.
No, probably not, because there are many factors that need to be in place for
Yeah.
that to happen, right? It's not because it's a complex process, right?
Yeah.
So the thing that happens is that if I want the students to learn grammar or anything, or the language in general, they have to be exposed to tons of input. They need to they need to understand most of it, and they need to pay attention to what is the input saying, right?
Yeah.
The message of the input, and doing something with it. That is the way they show you that they are. So there is no other way around it. It is what it is, right?
Yeah.
And of course, if you want to have if you want students to start acquiring communicative competence in the sense of interactions or using the language orally, right? We need to engage in interactions, right? So they also receive this input in a way in which that they are going to pay attention because it's an interaction. So whatever you are telling me, I need to respond. And so I am very much paying attention because I need to react to what you're saying, right? And the negotiation of meaning, which is also it enhances what is that you don't understand in the input to make it comprehensible. And
Yeah.
then the process of acquisition is happening, right?
Okay.
So the point that happens is that I don't know what is that my students what type of language they are learning. I don't know if they are learning the past tense, the articles. I don't know if they are learning vocabulary.
Yeah,
I don't know.
stages,
What
don't
can
know
I?
what are. Yeah.
I am just saying that they are learning. The system is creating their heads, and as the system is creating, what happens in the mouth when they talk, it's lots of errors.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that they are not creating something in there. Actually, it is.
It's constantly
Actually-
being restructured every time
Of course.
you expose it to.
Of course, and this restructuring, as we have seen in many studies, it's sometimes what you thought that you learned, you cannot learn. You go backwards, then you go back in the famous development curve. Sometimes you over how you call over. You do more things.
You
then
overgeneralize it.
Overgeneralizing,
Yes.
undergeneralizing. It is normal.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So what happens, and that is maybe undermining, is that in our effort for them to learn one thing, the present tense or whatever, one single thing, the grammar or the morphology of the verbs, we are doing a disservice to everything else that the students need to know in order that it will support eventually what you want it to learn. And the student does not know either what is that he or she's learning.
It's funny.
They don't know either.
It's funny that you have just basically confirmed a hypothesis that I've had for a very long time, which is something that whenever I'm talking about the difference between PPP and TBLT is that I always try to use the analogy of imagine that you are someone who is hunting, okay? And with PPP, you have one bullet and you have to get it right. With TBLT, you have a machine gun and you're just shooting many different things, and things are going to be like, because when you're performing a task, you are just not using the present continuous. It's often very limiting. It's almost like a straitjacket that we're putting on the students to be like, I want you to just do this using only the present continuous. It's impossible. It's virtually impossible for a person to only use the present continuous to communicate meaning, as opposed to task-based language teaching, where you have a variety of language structures, of vocabulary, of pronunciation, discourse, and things like that, which again, I think you just corroborated the idea that task-based language teaching is better because you are shooting at a bunch of different things, and whatever the learner is ready to acquire is going to stick. And which brings me to a question now from a listener, Jessica, who's a good friend of the podcast, listens to the show a lot. And she asked me this question. It was actually a very long question. I'm trying to summarize the question a little bit here. But she basically asked, where do we draw the line, Claudia, between the necessary explicit grammar instruction and allowing students to acquire language more naturally, like maybe through immersion, especially with adult beginners who feel that desire, that strong need to understand the rules?
Okay, so if for someone that really wants to understand the rules, which is okay, it's normal. People need humans, adults want that. It's fine. It's okay. Yeah. I would say give them the bunch of videos that are on the internet that explain the articles explaining, and this is very satisfying. I understand now what is it. I refer to the learners to these resources in which they can really understand these things. But I also tell them that in order to develop the communicative competence that they want to develop, this information is not going to serve very much. It serves more effective purposes than effective. But it's okay because you want it, you have it, and I would be curious too to know things. So that is one. So that is the way I would do the explicit information kind of thing of the student. The other thing is that with TBLT, it is not that we don't have attention to form at all. On the contrary, the attention to form is always there because it emanates from the need of the students to communicate. So the students are going to ask you how things are said. And the students are going to ask you what is the best say of things. And the students are going to ask you, why is it this and not this? And you may tell them, right? You can do just a recast, or you can just take 3 minutes or 1 minute and just identify things, and for them it's going to be satisfying. So it is not that it is completely not grammar at all. On the contrary, TBLT, it is a meaning-based syllabus or a meaning-based approach, but it has focus on form, which is reactive, and we want the students to learn key resources that are going to be useful for the task and advance their language learning, of course, right? It is. So I don't know if I understood the question or if I am answering the question, but the thing is that so you can provide explicit information in a TBLT class, in a TBLT course. There's nothing that is against it, right? And maybe it's even necessary or you're useful for the task at hand.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that you cannot do because we don't have evidence that works is start your lesson with a grammar form, practice the grammar form in contrived situations, and then ask the students to do a jump of 1 kilometer to do something that they are not prepared for, assuming that because they have practiced something, they can already use it in communication. So that is that we don't have evidence in theory or in practice or empirical evidence that works.
Yeah.
So we should not be doing that. We should not be doing that because that is really
interesting.
That acquisition. One of the things that what needs to happen for acquisition to take place is students have to make form meaning connections. They need to assign meaning to the form, and if the explicit information facilitates that connection, that's fine. That is good.
But as you said, there are also a lot of variables involved because is the student developmentally ready for that?
Exactly. That's another story. Exactly. Not because you make the first connection between form and meaning, it means that it's going to be integrated, because if they are not ready, they understood it, but it's not ready. They are not ready.
And I think, Claudia, that's the biggest reason why I think a lot of teachers still don't, perhaps, I guess, this is just my assumption, that teachers don't adopt a task-based framework yet is because they don't seem to fully understand the fact that you can focus on the form explicitly if you desire during the language focus of the TBLT framework. What TBLT discourages is this holistic, atomistic teaching of one specific target language or form and expecting the student to, as you said, take the leap from like, oh, I was presented with this, I did some drills, now I think I can use this communicatively without having given them plenty of opportunity to negotiate meaning, to interact, to receive comprehensible, compelling, rich input. Which brings me to the last question that I have. I don't know if Andrew has any more questions.
I have one more.
We have more. Do you want to ask that question? Or
Sure, I'll go now. I want to ask about needs analysis, Claudia. So what you're describing kind of is the need of the student, the need of the learner. You've described a lot that this is fundamental for the foundation of curriculum design with TBLT. But I also think, and I want to ask on your opinion or your advice for teachers, because teachers want to use, I think, a lot of them are very eager to use. It's one of the barriers, right? Mm-hmm. Because every class we have different people. In a quote unquote general English setting, it can be maybe burden is too strong, but just another task for the teacher to do this. Do you think that's an argument for the industry? And I think in some cases it is moving to a more English for a specific purpose area where a needs analysis could potentially be more, in terms of the tasks, not of the interest, but of the tasks be more transferable. Do you think that's the direction that the industry should move in? And also, can you share an example of how you've conducted needs analysis that listeners can learn from it and try to adopt in their context?
Yeah. I'm happy that you bring it up because it is something that is concerning to me, and I am gonna tell you what has been my situation and what I think about it. The needs analysis. So needs analysis, it was something that you need to do. And you can do it in a very informal way, in a way in which it gives you basic information for you to start, on a very sophisticated way if you have the resources and the time, right? And there is but some literature on needs analysis that it is very informative and that it is fantastic. It is very inspiring, right? However, the reality, and maybe Mike Long was not, maybe he knew about it, but he didn't he didn't have the chance, unfortunately, to expand the different contexts of where TBLT can be implemented. So in the context, for example, in my case, I didn't have the time and the resources to do a needs analysis for my program. Although my program, I believe, is a task-based language program, right? I mean, it also, and so that didn't preclude for me to create a communicative-based program. However, what happens is that the main purpose of the needs analysis is to create tasks that are relevant for the students' lives. It is something that we want because we want the task to be useful for the students. We want that what they are learning is something that they are going to be used or they are going to be interested in doing or they is valuable for them. So, of course, when you have children, when you are teaching elementary school, this is something that what is that 12 years old are interested in. But in my case, for example, in the case of the university, I only knew that I had 1 year of window of opportunity for me to start something new. And I didn't have the resources nor the training to do a needs analysis as it should have that in the sophistication of the analysis. However, in the workshops that I had, I was very curious of what the teachers or the instructors were telling me about the profile of the students, right? What is that our profile is? First generation students, they commute, they have a very pragmatic sense of language learning, right? They don't go to the major, right? They finish the language requirement and they go to different majors. Many of them are in the biology sciences. So these are the things that inform, right, what if the tasks are going to be relevant or not. For example, I learned in these workshops that the students wanted to learn Spanish because they wanted to use Spanish in conversations with the community or with the family of their significant others, or because they want to use it in their work. So it has very pragmatic. So they were not interested in writing, for example. So what I did, I'm going to tweak the tasks and create a task so students really can develop the confidence of learning, of using the language orally. So my point is that any information that you get from the students is going to be good enough, at least could be enough for you to have a sense of what is that what is the type of tasks that I want this, or the students will be interested or need to do, interested. If I knew that 70% of the students go to the major, to the language, to the Spanish major, I would ask the teachers in the major, what is that you require the students to do in the major, so the students are starting with the tasks here. And if they would tell me students have to write essays, you bet that I will be having tasks in which they have to write essays and not orally only. You know what I mean? So a little information can be useful for you to design. It should not preclude, it should not be a barrier for you to create a task base. And it is very naive to think that once you have your tasks done, they are going to be there forever. No, you have your tasks done at the beginning, and then the second year you think, you know what, this task number 7 is awful. So we need to finish it because we need to take it another one because students really hate this task. You know what I mean? So it is a process of you start with something and maybe the profile of the students change and you need to change the tasks.
Or works with one group and doesn't work with another, right?
Exactly. So that should not be. I am creating, just to finish this with this response, but I was asked to create an asynchronous class for Spanish 101 in the summer. And I wanted to do it task-based because I don't know how to do it otherwise. It's got to be task-based or I don't do it. So it is going to be task-based. Don't ask me how I'm going to do it because I don't know how, as an asynchronous class, task-based looks like. However, my first question was, what is the profile of the students that are going to take this asynchronous class? Mm-hmm. And neither the university nor the curriculum designers could give me this information.
Wow.
So what I have to say, I asked, if you were 28 years old, which I think is the age of these students that are going to take the course, what would you like to do in Spanish in Chicago? So I need to get information here and there informally because I cannot do a needs analysis because nobody tells me what the profile of the students is. Nobody knows. But is it going to be an obstacle for me to do a task-based task course? No, it should not. It should be something that I need to find information somewhere, and I need to create tasks that are maybe relevant or interesting for these students. And if once I get the program, I get to know the students better, then I change the tasks accordingly.
Yeah, there's a lot there to unpack from this. I wish we had more time. I wish we could go for 2 hours, 3 hours.
We'll do a part 2.
I think
after
we're
your
have
summer
to come
course,
back.
we'll do a part 2.
Yeah, I think Claudia's going to have to come back. But the last question I have for you, Claudia, is it's not really a question, but more of a call to action, perhaps. But what is, based on your experience working in universities, in higher education institutions, working with teachers, getting them to move away from a more prescriptive to a more reactive approach to language education, what is one belief that you think a lot of teachers hold on to that they need to perhaps start rethinking or thinking again in order to change their mind about it?
I think that that one belief is that the learners have to learn basic language first before doing something more sophisticated. And so they believe that you have blocks, that if you don't learn the articles, you cannot learn the nouns. If you don't learn the nouns, you cannot learn the verbs. You don't like Duolingo, though sometimes, sorry that I say that, but it has been my experience. So that language development happens in blocks, right? That you have to master one thing before you master another one, before you master another, and then you are going to be able to have a conversation with them. So that is something that we should get rid of because that doesn't happen. We don't have evidence that happens, right? You don't need basic things in order to do something else that it is more communicative. If you want students to work in communicative events, you need to put them in communicative events since the beginning. That's it. They don't need blocks. They don't need anything before. If they want to be able to exchange information about names and ages, they have to do that. You have to be. They don't need. So I think that is one of belief that we need to get rid of, in my opinion.
I hope we can. I hope we find a way to change that.
Excellent.
Just try it.
Yes. Claudia, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate having you here on the show, and we hope to have you back sometime soon.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for listening to me. It's fantastic. It's a gift when someone asks you to talk about something that you really are fascinated by. So I am very happy to meet you guys and hope to see you in person someday soon.
We would love that.